Hello, everyone. Tom Fox back for another episode. And today I'm thrilled to have with me Heidi Hunter. Heidi, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Heidi, could you tell us a little bit about your professional background and your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, I am the Chief Product Officer for Ideology, and my job function now is to help build our product strategy for our identity verification solutions here in the United States. Ideology is part of a larger group of companies underneath GBG, which is HQ'd out of the UK, and we head up the Americas branch. For me, myself, I started in this company, if you can believe it, Tom, almost 13 years ago. I was a customer support rep, and over the years, I've worked into product management and grown up to now be leading product and strategy for the company. So I cut my teeth, if you will, and helping clients translate our product into solutions and ways that they can be compliant with the various laws that they needed to and how our services met those requirements. And now I'm absolutely delighted to get to work with them in the capacity of building the products that they're going to use to help them mitigate fraud and be compliant.
So you told us a little bit about ideology there, but I was wondering if you could expand on some of the compliance solutions you and your team offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, where we fit very well is meeting KYC and KYB compliance. So, know your customer and know your business. Our products are data driven solutions that are digital first, they work great in a digital environment. And the products that we have can take in various data elements, nominal attributes like name and address, to very full types of reviews: name, address, date of birth, social, email, IP, all these additional data factors. But we essentially vet those for our clients and we pull back as much data, insight, analytics, risk appetite, and evaluation that we can. And we deliver that back to our clients using various products and features, decision builders, so that they have a full view of the data that they were given. Can we assert this as a real person? Do we think it's stolen? All the good things that come along with meeting that compliance. And we do that in a consumer capacity and then also in the business capacity.
So, how would you characterize the AML or anti money laundering life cycle?
That is such a loaded question. I think it really depends on who you're talking to, right? And what their needs are. In the US today, we've got such a branch of different types of companies and things that are going on today from a financial perspective, right? You've got your heavily regulated banking clients that they've been under these types of regulations for 20, 30 years longer, all the way into the ones that are unregulated, coming into being regulated, like crypto, right? So it's really broad. It depends on who you are and what you're obligated to do. But the way that I would define that life cycle, regardless of how much obligation you have from the government to mitigate and do certain things, is to take in data on a consumer, and you need to verify that person. First, you need to, from a regulatory perspective, make sure that person appears to exist, right? And so you need to verify their name, their address, their date of birth, their social. You want to make sure that there's enough history there that you feel confident this is a valid individual. But the other side of it, what you want to be looking for is risk. We know there's data breaches. There's so many things going on with first party fraud, synthetic. So you also want to take a deeper dive, right, in onboarding to go look for those factors and pull back as much information as you can. So you're not just making sure the person is real, legitimate, and can pass the checks that you need to do. You also want to make sure they're really the person that you're transacting with, right? And it's not a fraudster on the other side. And once you've gotten through onboarding and you've brought them into your business, then you have the additional steps that you need to do, right? Your obligations under that. You want to make sure, again, outside of doing due diligence, which is verifying those attributes, that you are stepping them into different levels of due diligence based on those findings, maybe more of an enhanced level. And then once they have the account and everything's open, then you're going to have your recurring evaluations of those identities, right? So you want to be doing things in the life cycle like verifying that people in your population have not been reported as deceased, that there's no other potential risk factors, they haven't been added to recently to a PEPs or a sanctions list, right? So outside of making sure you meet your due diligence requirements from a regulatory perspective during onboarding, in the life cycle, you've got these other pieces of regulations you need to continue to meet as you run through. So it can be really challenging to have to meet all of those obligations, but if you have good policies built around those things and you're working with technology that will keep you on the forefront of those requirements and always be offering products to help make sure that you stay compliant, it can be met with ease through technology, which is nice.
I'd like to turn now to AI and compliance. And I know you guys, if are not at the forefront, are one of the companies that's really leading that discussion in terms of thought leadership and, of course, in product development and services for companies. But what are some of the key regulatory trends that you see impacting AI or even really any other automation tools at this point?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. I think with AI in general, and if you ever look at any of the congressional hearings of some of the social media companies that have utilized it, right? I think generally from a regulatory perspective, there's a good bit of lack of understanding of how it works. We know that there's been, just from an industry perspective, some places where it's been misapplied, and not just in consumer identity and digital onboarding, just across the spectrum of any time that you're using AI in a digital environment to find out factors or information about an individual. So just climactically, you've got this kind of interesting place where I think regulators are trying to get their hands on it. People are trying to figure out how they should use it. And then we've got things like Chat GPT, where the technology is so far ahead of all of us, and we're trying to figure out what to do with it. And I think for people that are using it in this environment today, the challenge of explainability to a regulator can be really difficult. I think historically, most folks have used rules engines and things like this, where it's very clear what the policy is from a compliance perspective that you're using, right? You can explain that to a regulator. Using AI can be challenging, I think, in order to come back to the regulator and explain how you got to this outcome. How did they get approved, right, through AI? And so those are some of the things that we see when we look in and look outside of this. And from our perspective, I think our approach to it is a little bit different. We use it in a post environment. And for us, that helps us with some of those layers and providing those insights to people.
Let me see if I can translate that into some basic compliance speak.
Yeah.
I say the three most important things on any compliance program for any law or any regulation is the following: document. Because if you don't have it documented, in a regulator's eyes, it never happened. And I thought I just heard you say that was one of the challenges with AI, or certainly Chat GPT, is how do you document with an auditable trail that if a regulator comes knocking, you can show that to them. Would that be a fair assessment of some of the concerns that you just raised?
Yeah, absolutely. Because machine learning models, they can very much be a not transparent box. So, how do you take that information and turn it into something that makes a regulator comfortable that from a policy perspective, you're onboarding these individuals appropriately in the way that you should? I still feel, Tom, from a compliance perspective, that decision matrices and the way that you can disseminate at least the onboarding part of compliance, right? That holds a place until the AI can get to that point where explainability can be done. Where I think it works very well is on the risk side, right? And helping you mitigate risk, because AI can be utilized to find things in a faster space, right? So if you've got a solution that's multi-layered, it's not relying on just one or the other. It's very advantageous because you've got your compliance explainability through your rules. And then if AI is helping feed that with its modeling and its abilities to look at risk, then that's a very easy way to tell a regulator, from a compliance perspective, we met our obligations with this individual, but ultimately we declined this application because we were able to find through our models that there's very high risk behavior here. So that way you've on both sides of how you're looking at things.
I'm going to even take another stab at translate that into compliances, because I just think you said one of the most profound things I've heard. Every compliance program is designed to do three things: prevent, detect, and remediate. I heard you start off talking about how AI can be used to help detect because of the amount of information that can be crunched and the speed. But then you gave me the hook, and I'm completely hooked now, because you said as it progresses, it moves from simple detection. I shouldn't say simple, from detection to prevention, because through a traditional risk-based approach, by analyzing the risk, it identifies areas that have too much risk for the parameters you personally or your organization may have set. Now, did I understand what you said correctly?
Yes. And I think you said it so much more eloquent than I did, Tom, but I agree completely. Yes. That's exactly the point I was trying to make.
Because I talk to many people on this topic, and almost universally, they talk about the detection problem.
Yeah.
But detection means something's happened.
Right.
And we always say it's much cheaper to prevent than to detect and remediate.
Absolutely.
And that's why you hooked me, because as we move towards something that can give us that prevent, either with basic AI or with the machine learning components that you hinted at, that's where I think the real breakthrough is going to come for every type of compliance, whether it's fraud risk management, AML, export control, anti-bribery, anti-corruption, it doesn't matter. So now let me maybe pivot to your role as the chief product officer. Are these concepts that you guys are talking about or developing, or maybe even you have put forward now? Where is ideology or even GBG in this discussion?
Yeah. So, from our perspective, where we really see the value in AI is in automation. It is a tremendous amount of data that we are looking at, because we actually have a dedicated team of fraud analysts, right? So there is a team at Ideology that's a benefit of being a customer of ours that will sit and evaluate transactional activity and look for fraud patterns. We think this is a very good investment in our tech, though, because that team then provides that information to people like myself in product, the people in technology, the people on the customer side. And they use that communication link in order to help advise customers of behaviors that we're seeing. Because if you think about from a view perspective, right, if we're seeing something in a particular customer, it's a bit problematic. But if we're seeing the same trend expand to many customers in the same vertical, or even across our entire business, because that's the one thing that we've seen, these identities don't tend, or these transactions that are risky don't tend to just be financial, right? Because once they get a hold of the funds, and maybe the bank is part of the place that the money gets sent to, or it's where the theft starts, it's going to move, right? There's going to be possibly a P2P transfer to send it somewhere else. We might see e-commerce activity tied to it, right? It's going to travel. So our team's ability to sit on the top of all of that helps give a lot of insights. But obviously that's a lot of data. We're running a lot of people every day. So what we use AI for is to help improve their capacity. So over the years, that team has worked with our technology team to develop machine learning models that run over the data every night and looks for activity that's suspicious. And then the fraud team is our manual review to basically assert back to that model, hey, this is bad, you did a good job, or this was a false positive. And so they have a queue where they're managing these things, right? And giving it that constant feedback. And then what the models find that's problematic gets disseminated out to our clients so that they're abreast of something, again, that we saw from a hierarchical standpoint, higher up in our flow or across the spread, or maybe just in their own network. But we feel like it needs that observant oversight. And by having a team that's supervising that model manually, that's really where it strengthens. We're comfortable in the explainability of the risk that we're finding there, because a human is actually intervening and reviewing the findings and making sure that it's making good assertions. But what we like about this process is it doesn't only just give us stronger models, but again, it helps automate that work. So where that team would have poured through that data and ultimately found that's high risk behavior can be brought to the top, immediately addressed and shared. Right. And that speeds up their ability to then spend time looking at maybe other trends that didn't get caught by the technology, right? Or something that's completely unique that we need to build a model for. So that's the value that we have in helping automate what they're doing and strengthen basically the types of views and the quantity of data that they can look at.
Can AI have a blind spot, and can the human element help overcome that if one exists?
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely can have a blind spot. I saw a speaker recently talk about Chat GPT and how if you give it prescriptive information to draw a picture, right, the way that it's going to translate that feedback is only as good as the learnings that it's been given to date or what's been asked, right? Computers are very objective, but that objectivity is subjective to the person that programmed it or the types of questions that are being asked, right? It's not a human. Humans have a level of reasoning capacity, thinking, right, that a computer is only going to have if it's been trained to look that way. So by having that oversight, you're making sure that those places where those oversights are happening, or where we're not finding things that we should be finding, you're closing those holes and mitigating it.
So how does the individual fraud examiner at one of your client companies or customers utilize these tools? Or perhaps if they came to you and asked you to help train fraud examiner, how would you begin that process?
The data. It always starts with the data, Tom. You always want to start with what you have and what's been problematic. It's always great to have a foundational point. And we can either, with these types of conversations, we can either begin with a recent group of trends that a client has seen, or with taking the insights that we've gathered from the reviews that we've done and sharing that with them. But it always starts with the data. And going back to your point, those blind spots, go find the blind spots. Once you find those blind spots, then you can start looking for what are the collective data trends around this? What risk flags did we have, or what can we build? But helping show them how these things are not normal behavior, right? It would not be normal for Heidi to go open 10 bank accounts in one day. It would not be normal for 30 people to be applying for a bank account through the same phone number. What is not normal consumer behavior? And a lot of times when I'm working with my team on these, or the fraud team's working with us, we always try to think about ourselves, right? So sometimes it's good to put yourself in the shoes of the data you're evaluating and ask yourself, is this normal? Would I do this? Would a 80-year-old grandma be getting a prepaid card that it's from something that's like on an investment account? I'm trying not to name any customers that we have on an investment account, or something that came out of a retail store. Probably not, right? So I think, again, to your point, taking those blind spot places, putting yourself in the seat of the consumer, thinking about what's normal and what's not, it's honestly your best bet for figuring out how to find and crack these places.
So I give out special gold star awards during podcasts for people who name the title of the episode within their remarks, and not normal behavior is a winner.
Oh,
So
well,
congratulations,
thank you.
Heidi Hunter, on AI and not normal behavior. That's brilliant. Wow. Now I noticed on the firm website, Idology, that there is a 2023 fraud risk report. You've talked about your fraud risk management team within the organization. Did the information they look at help form the basis of that report? I'm not asking you to really go into it in any detail at this point, but do you know where the information from that report came from?
It did. So it's a combination of things that our team saw, and also conversations that we had with customers about what they're experiencing and what they're seeing. So it's a combined effort of insights from our fraud team and that team of analysts, but also customers who chose to contribute and share their insights about what they are seeing and things that are going on in the space.
So could I ask you to maybe look down the road a little bit and talk about any things that you see around AI and fraud detection, or even fraud risk management down the road? Because the prevention prong is really where I hope we can get to, because the effectiveness of that is so much greater. But really, any thoughts on even the direction you guys are going or having internal discussions on your team?
Yeah, absolutely. If you would have asked me this, Tom, prior to the launch of ChatGPT, I probably would have said that AI is going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to find ways to use it to mitigate risk and find ways to prevent fraud from happening. But I don't know, with the change and the consumer accessibility of that function, it's almost, I don't know why the Batman reference is coming up in my head, but if you've ever seen the Dark Knight series, there's a comment that one of the police chiefs makes where he says, we buy this type of Kevlar vest and they buy armor piercing rounds. It's every time we as an industry start to make these big progressions, these guys are so much farther ahead of us. My mindset around these things, I really had thought that as an industry, we were going to make some pretty big strides in the growth in our use of AI. But now that there is readily available ChatGPT, I actually think what we're going to see now is that the threat risk is going to really be on the rise. So I think as groups, we're finding now that, I think the FTC published a report that company spend on fraud and risk mitigation is increasing dramatically. I think that is an absolute wonderful trend, and it should continue, because these guys just got a very large piece of equipment. And I think all of us need to be really thinking about that tool, thinking about some of these things that are on the market. I think there's a lot of things that we can do in the industry to help strengthen ourselves, though. I would tell everyone in a safe space, Interact with that thing. Figure out what it can do, figure out what it can't do. There's a business version of it that's coming in. Use it to mine your data. Use it to figure out what gaps you have in your policies and your risk plans. I would also encourage anybody to go take a look on the dark web, again, safely. Don't just go access this on your work PC, but see if you can get set up with some of these things. What are these guys talking about? What are they trying to do? And then start thinking about being proactive from a policy perspective about how you're going to make sure that people are comfortable with the technology that you're using, and looking at the tech that you're using and figuring out, is it going to help you mitigate these risks that you're seeing? The information's definitely out there, but part of being proactive is understanding the enemy. And so if you want to understand the enemy, you got to go spend a little time figuring out who they are and what they're after and what they're doing. And it's a worthwhile investment. So I think a combination of strategy, insight, and then also tech is really what we're going to see.
Are we talking red team, blue team here?
Yeah. Yes, we are. Absolutely.
Unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but before we get there, I have a special bonus question.
Okay.
I rarely get to visit with someone who has an undergraduate degree in history.
Oh.
So I have one. So tell me what your history degree was in.
So mine was in US history, just a basic. I actually wanted to be a teacher, if you can believe it. And I think for me, the Civil War is definitely my favorite. I'm from Atlanta. We definitely had a lot of history happen here. And I think the progression from that time to now is a very interesting time. It's got some fraught parts, but I think you can learn a lot from it, learn a lot about yourself and the type of culture you want to build from it. But I'm fascinated by it because there's just so much of it down here in the South. How about you, Tom?
Central European history, French Revolution to the present. So you want to talk the
Yay!
Kingdom of Greater Bohemia, circa 1800? I'm your guy.
See, that is so fancy. That's wonderful.
There was actually, did you watch Succession?
I have not. I've heard wonderful things, but it's on my to-do list. I don't watch a lot of TV. I actually read more than I watch TV.
Okay. In one of the episodes, there was a reference to the free trade zone and the Habsburg Empire. And I wrote my honors thesis on that.
That is awesome. Isn't it wonderful when it dovetails like that? So there was a woman who wrote a Civil War diary, and I have never been able to find her book. I was in a bookstore in North Georgia and actually found it. I heard about her through a PBS documentary. I'm a huge fan of the United States history series that's on there. There's probably like 8 or 9 that have been done. They're fantastic. But I actually found an older copy that was published in like the 40s in this bookstore. It was like falling apart, but I was just absolutely delighted.
Was it Mary Chestnut's diary?
Yes, it was. It was. Yeah, it's very good, isn't it?
It is. It is. So unfortunately, now we are at the end of our time. But before we leave, if our listeners wanted more information on yourself, on ideology, or really any of the topics we've touched on, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
Absolutely. So if you'd like to just learn more about ideology overall, you can go to ideology.com, and we have a whole library of content that's on there, like that, the fraud study that we talked about. We've also got a consumer report on there that's very good. If you want to reach out to me directly online, I'm on LinkedIn. Please feel free to send me a message if you want to have any conversations about compliance or any of the things that you and I talked about today, Tom, or you just want to learn more about ideology. Or talk history is also good. And you can always email or call us as well. That's on our website.
Heidi, this has been way too much fun. And I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Tom.